All right, so I saw Sonic 3 last night, and let me start off short version without all the exposition. It is good. This was a total love letter to Sonic Adventure 2 also. Now, there was some stuff that I figured they could have gone a little bit further with, but looking back at the script now and how they did the movie, it makes sense on why they held back a little bit. So, like the Sonic movies, the characters are kind of their own taste, but they're very similar to the counterparts you get in the game. Obviously, Knuckles, he's the one in the group who doesn't quite get social cues, which, is a bit of a exaggeration. But when you reach out to the games and how they portrayed Knuckles, I think he's the dullest of the bunch. He's not necessarily completely dumb, but he's like, if you were to say the least smart, probably. So Sonic, with his arrogance, it is a little magnified like always. I feel like if you actually play the games, that Sonic is a little quippy. He's very confident. He knows what he's doing. In this one, he's his own shade, like very similar, but still a little bit different. Like kind of like if it was music theory, he'd be like a half step away, like above or down. But that's the thing I like about this movie. There's a little bit of every character that's similar, but the movie kind of takes on its own tone while still maintaining the original source material. I mean, obviously, even with Jim Carrey, he's playing a comedic role with Dr. Robotnik. And in this one, he plays Gerald Robotnik. And there was a scene in this movie where they even pointed to the fact that Jim Carrey was playing both of these guys. And it's like they spelt it out in the script. So that's the one thing I do like about this movie is it's self-aware. It knows what it is. It's not trying to be something it's not. But like I said, this movie is definitely Sonic Adventure 2 adjacent. I'd say like 70% of it. The other 30% is definitely its own thing. So that's good. I wouldn't want to see a complete remake on screen of Sonic Adventure 2. But, let's get to the one character that I was super invested in how they were going to do it, Shadow the Hedgehog. And you know what? They did Shadow the Hedgehog justice. Now, obviously, he did take on that bit of movie tone where, it's, at times it felt like he was the same note being hit. Very gloomy, very melancholy. Not that it took away from the moral of his story and how you shouldn't let revenge consume you. But he had that very Sonic movie tone to him where it's like, they kind of just had an archetype that they were following, but it was an archetype that was so close to what the original Sonic games were, the ones that did the Sonic and Shadow characters right. Like the Shadow character was actually done to the same tune that he was in Sonic Adventure 2. And you know what? That's kind of what I was expecting. I was like thinking how they've done the rest of the characters. It's not going to be 100% the Shadow we know. I'd say it's 90%. But still, they did not disappoint with the expectation I had for this movie. And it wasn't no expectation. Nowadays, with Hollywood movies, I go in with no expectation because they drop the ball more often than they score a point. But this, in my opinion, was a slam dunk that we kind of needed. But I am going to get into spoilers, so this is your last chance to turn the video off. It's going to go in 3, 2, 1. But yeah, I'm going to start off with some spoilers that we probably saw coming, but then I'm going to go into the one thing that I thought was going to be in. But in hindsight, I'm kind of glad it wasn't. And it's obviously not going to be too much spoiler because I'd rather have you guys see the movie because I am highly recommending it. But yes, references to Live and Learn by Crush 40 from Sonic Adventure 2 are definitely in there. They actually had a moment at the end of the movie where you had Super Sonic and Super Shadow team up like they did at the end of Sonic Adventure 2. But even in the beginning, like it showed an acoustic version of the riff from the opening of that song when you had the Maria flashbacks. She was playing it on the guitar. And you know what? They did the Maria and Shadow relationship justice. Like Maria was his only friend in a world that kind of was afraid of him. But I did enjoy the fact that that song was referenced. I thought that was amazing. So thank you to the makers for at least trying to work it in. Now, they didn't do the complete song. Obviously, there might have been some royalty issues, but they did enough to like just give it its own tone. And obviously with Dr. Robotnik, you had his whole arc with Gerald and how he didn't have any family, and then he meets Gerald Robotnik, but it's, he's all just a pawn in Gerald's game also. And then you have Gerald Robotnik, he's the darker version of Dr. Robotnik, where Dr. Robotnik kind of looks at himself and realizes he's not all 110% evil like he thinks he is in the first two movies. Because, if you watch the first two movies and you see how he was portrayed, it just kind of showed that he owned up to the fact that he was just a bad guy. But I think he was just a product of his environment and wasn't completely far gone like Gerald was. So, he actually ends up pulling off the sacrifice with Shadow to end up stopping the Eclipse cannon from firing onto Earth. And basically, it's almost like Sonic Adventure 2, where the bad guys join the good guys and stop the problem together. And the bad guys are even able to show their own heroic feats. But I liked how they concluded Dr. Robotnik's arc. And you know what? I could tell that Jim Carrey really knocked out of the park with this performance. And, he was always such an animated actor. And just to see him kind of like give it his all and, really finish strong to what seems like the ending points of his career is awesome. He was kind of born to play this role, even though it was his own version of Dr. Robotnik. But he was having fun, 110%. Like, that guy gives 110 to every role that he does. But the one part of the movie, looking back, that I wanted to see when it started, the BioLizard from the end of Sonic Adventure 2 that Shadow faces. I'm going to be very real. I was actually hoping that we were going to get to see that once we were going with the Eclipse cannon and everything, because that was actually the interesting part looking back, is Shadow like kind of looks at himself as like a monstrosity, but then he has to fight what a monstrosity actually is. So, you see Robotnik kind of take on Shadow's arc in that sense. But I think, honestly, if they were to put in that BioLizard now, it might have been a little bit too crowded of a movie. We probably would have gotten like 10 minutes worth of it, not enough to justify even putting it in. And I think the final battle between Sonic and Shadow, when they're in control of the Emeralds and they're fighting all over the Earth, I think that was better. And also, by the way, though, like, this movie really did show how overpowered Shadow is. Like, throughout the entire movie, Sonic didn't even come close to touching Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, he was just that good. Like, all three of them feared Shadow. But then even then, like, there's a part at the end where they're fighting and Shadow says something to Sonic to kind of really set him off in anger, and Sonic, hits him with a good hit and then is able to get the upper hand for a split second. But it was like one of those, things of the better fighter losing, where the kind of like not so power puncher gets a good shot and then is able to close the show. It just kind of seemed like overall Shadow was the more dominant force and probably the most powerful character. And yeah, it was like kind of like a really lucky hit that kind of almost vanquished him. So the movie really showed just what a threat he was. It was almost like Thanos in the Infinity War movies, like the two movies, where you realize the only reason they're able to actually beat Thanos is because he was weakened after destroying the Infinity Stones in Endgame. They kind of gave that effect to the movie overall, where it was like, yeah, this guy is a bad mamma jamma. I'm not going to swear, especially when I am referencing a kid's movie. But as a guy who grew up with the games overall, I could just say that, if you're a parent who has a kid, this is the perfect movie to take your child to. There were kids in the theater, and seeing parents who played the game bond with their kids and seeing them like kind of show the Shadow arc, and now maybe they could bring them home and play Sonic Adventure 2 with them. I think that overall, not just, the movie, I give a 9 out of 10, but I feel like the small cultural impact it's going to give with bonding parents and kids and allowing them to, bond over something that they have similar interest in, I think that's going to be a positive thing, which is kind of something we need, because my last movie that I really in-depthly reviewed and reminisced on was Joker 2. And it wasn't so much that I was set off by the movie. In fact, I actually appreciate it for what it is because of the cultural ripple and response the audience had to it that I found interesting. And yeah, no, it was kind of being interested in the chaos. This was one of those times where I could kind of just relax and just a kind of a fun family movie that, it's good for kids, it entertains them. And if you're an adult that grew up with these characters and, wants to know, is it going to have something in it for the older audiences? Definitely. It's something for everybody. And especially when younger people are always arguing with the older people, seeing them come together over something like this, I think this was just a positive note in a world of chaos. Like that's kind of a reference to the Chaos Emeralds zing. But it's going to be something that I think the world needs a little bit of. And you know what? I give this movie a 9 out of 10, but that's what I think. I will see you guys on the next one. I'm very happy I saw this movie. Now, it's not going to be too deep or philosophical, or I'm going to stew over it. It's a fun movie, but, it's something that entertained me. And you know what? Thank you to the Hollywood Machine for busting out a gem. I'm going to call it an emerald like this because it did shine bright with all the bad movies that are coming out. But I'll see you guys on the next one. See you next time.